73 years ago, a scientist heard a signal from deep space and buried it, writing, "Some silences are protective." An archivist just unlocked that signal. Now we must ask, was she protecting it or protecting us from it? Stay with me, because the answer lies buried in a file no one was ever meant to open. Before we begin, tell me, where in the world are you watching from? Let us know in the comments below, and hit that subscribe button to help uncover the stories they tried to bury and make sure no name stays forgotten. The silence is the first thing you notice at Relay Station Epsilon. It's a physical presence, a weight that settles in your bones. Out here, 250,000 miles from the nearest human soul, the universe is a vast, empty cathedral, and Dr. Eris Thorne is its only parishioner. His job is simple: to listen, to archive the endless hiss and crackle of deep space, cataloging the whispers of dying stars and the hum of distant galaxies. It is a slow, methodical existence where time is measured not in days, but in the gentle, rhythmic hum of the station's life support. For 5 years, Eris had found a strange comfort in the solitude, in the profound indifference of the cosmos. The loneliness was a clean, sharp thing, not a wound. Until he found Anomaly 73K. It was buried deep in the digital archives, a ghost from an era of magnetic tape and vacuum tubes. The official record was sparse, clinical, a burst of structured, non-random static logged 73 years ago from the direction of the Kepler 186 system. The original survey team dismissed it. Sensor ghosting, they called it. A flicker in the machine, an echo without a source. The case file was closed in less than a week, officially open, but practically forgotten. But Eris couldn't let it go. Surrounded by a library of meaningless noise, this one file felt different. It had a texture, a cadence. Modern instruments, with their sophisticated filters designed to scrub imperfections, would have erased it as corrupted data. But in its raw, unclean state, it felt like a voice trying to break through static. It was a question no one had bothered to ask. His obsession began quietly. During his off-cycle hours, he started the painstaking work of reconstruction, a digital archaeological dig into a moment frozen in time. He wasn't just an archivist anymore. He was an investigator, and Anomaly 73K was his cold case. The file became his companion in the crushing emptiness. The not knowing was a torture, a splinter beneath his skin. He'd sit for hours in the station's main observatory, the star-dusted velvet of the void spread out before him, and he would listen to the faint, structured hiss on a loop. It was a whisper from a graveyard of dead stars. He began to treat the signal not as an error, but as a victim. He felt a solemn duty to it, a need to bear witness. The universe had said something 73 years ago, and the world had looked away. Eris Thorne refused. He would become the keeper of this lost narrative, the voice for a sound that could no longer speak. Because he understood a truth that only the truly lonely can. Sometimes, the most important messages are the ones that arrive with no sender, addressed to no one, and are heard only by the one person patient enough to listen to the silence. And in the heart of that ancient static, Eris was beginning to hear a name he couldn't yet place. a story he was born to uncover. The Earth gives back what it takes, and even in the void, the truth has a way of rising to the surface. Dust floated in the beams of the monitor like snow caught in a photograph. For weeks, Eris worked with a quiet, monastic devotion. He dedicated his off-cycle hours to the ghost in his machine, writing a custom decryption algorithm line by painstaking line. He was stripping away 73 years of digital decay, peeling back layers of signal degradation and cosmic radiation that had clung to the file like shroud. He personified the work. This wasn't corrupted data. It was the faded photograph of a missing person, and he was restoring it, hoping to see a face. His initial efforts yielded little. The static became cleaner, sharper, but it was still just noise. The trail was ice cold. Physical evidence had been lost or deteriorated. For a moment, doubt settled in, cold and heavy as the void outside. Was he just chasing shadows, projecting a story onto the meaningless chatter of the universe? Then he remembered a piece of theoretical technology from his academy days, a quantum resonance filter. It was a complex algorithm designed to detect underlying order in chaotic systems, a process the original survey team couldn't have even imagined. It was a long shot, a desperate move. He ran the anomaly through the filter, and then he saw it. His heart pounded in the crushing silence of the station. A shadow emerged from the static, a pattern impossibly complex and layered, hiding beneath the primary signal like a watermark. It was not a message in the human sense of language. There were no words, no images. It was something more fundamental, more universal. It was a mathematical lament. The sequence was a perfect repeating map of the decay rates of exotic particles, muons, strange quarks, tau leptons. It was a sequence that should only occur in the final, agonizing moments before the heat death of a universe. A structured, repeating scream of physics. A chill traced its way down Eris' spine, a cold wholly separate from the station's recycled air. This wasn't sensor ghosting. This wasn't an equipment malfunction. This was a broadcast. It was deliberate, complex, and impossibly ancient. The truth, when it surfaced, was so much worse than anything he had ever imagined. The case had just broken wide open, but the revelation offered no comfort. It only deepened the mystery, twisting it into something terrifying. The central question was no longer, what is this signal? It was, who would build a transmitter to broadcast the sound of the end of everything? And the more chilling question that followed, whispered in the back of his mind, why? The silence that followed his discovery was dense, not peaceful, ancestral. The past wasn't gone, it had just been quiet, and Eris was about to make it loud. To understand the signal, Eris had to understand the silence that followed it. For 70.3 years, this case had gathered dust, a whisper buried under decades of official procedure. Why? He turned his attention from the stars to the people who first saw them. He dove into the station's personnel archives, pulling the files on the original survey team. Mission logs, psych evaluations, transfer requests, a portrait of a crew under immense pressure. Their leader was a woman named Dr. Ilara Vance. Her file painted a picture of a brilliant but severe astrophysicist, a woman of rigid logic who had little patience for ambiguity. Her mandate was clear: chart habitable zones for future colonization, not chase cosmic phantoms. But as Eris dug deeper, he found Vance's private logs, sealed under layers of encryption that were formidable even by modern standards. It took him 2 weeks to break them. What he found inside made his blood run cold. Vance didn't describe Anomaly 73.K as a sensor ghost. She called it an auditory poison. Her entries, written in stark, clinical prose, detailed a creeping dread that had infected her crew. It started with vivid nightmares, identical across the team. Dreams of vast, empty cities and a sky filled with dying suns. Then came the paranoia, a shared, inexplicable sense of being watched, of a presence just on the edge of perception. They heard whispers in the station's ventilation, saw movement in their peripheral vision. 2 crew members requested immediate psychiatric leave. A third attempted to sabotage the communications array. Vance, a woman built of empirical data, dismissed it all. Space sickness, she wrote, the predictable psychological toll of deep space isolation. Her official reports reflect this. They are models of scientific detachment. But her private logs tell a different story. They tell of a captain watching her crew unravel from something she couldn't measure or explain. Every answer was like a knife made of fog. You could feel the edge, but you couldn't see it. The final log entry was dated the same day she ordered the anomaly flagged as instrument malfunction, and personally signed the order to archive the data into deep storage. It was a single cryptic sentence, a chilling epitaph for a discovery she chose to bury. Some silences are protective, she wrote. We heard a door close, and we have no right to open it. Eris leaned back in his chair, the glow of the monitor illuminating the profound dark of his quarters. His heart pounded a slow, heavy rhythm. The case wasn't just cold, it had been intentionally frozen. Vance hadn't ignored the signal, she had recoiled from it. She had looked into an abyss and, with terrifying certainty, had chosen to build a wall around it. And for 73 years, that wall had held. Until now. Ilara Vance's fear was a loose thread. Eris pulled on it, and a conspiracy began to unravel. If one scientist was willing to bury a discovery of this magnitude, was she acting alone? He began to cross-reference the Kepler-186 system with other astronomical databases from her era, looking for inconsistencies, for any sign of a cover-up. What he found was a trail of breadcrumbs so faint it could only be seen by someone actively searching for it. A pattern of erasure. It began with the stellar charts. Old surveys of the Kepler-186 system, digitized from photographic plates, showed minute discrepancies when compared to modern maps. Faint objects on the periphery of the system, logged in the original observations, were simply missing from later surveys. They hadn't moved. They had been deleted. It wasn't a mistake. This was removal, replacement, erasure. Then he found the probe. 70 years ago, the Deep-Range Surveyor Odyssey 7 was scheduled to pass through the Kepler-186 system on its way to the galactic fringe. Its mission was to map interstellar magnetic fields. But 6 months before it reached the system, the Odyssey suffered a mysterious, catastrophic malfunction. All communication ceased. The official report cited a micrometeoroid strike, a 1 in a billion chance. No wreckage, no final transmission, just silence. A tragic mystery swallowed by the void. But when Aris plotted its last known trajectory, he saw it was heading directly for the same point in space where anomaly 73K had originated. Each piece of missing information was another layer of soundproofing placed around the signal. This wasn't the work of a single concerned scientist trying to protect her crew. This was a coordinated, methodical, decades-long effort. It was quiet, it was patient, and it was terrifyingly efficient. Someone with immense influence wanted the Kepler-18 system to remain a blank spot on the map, a question no one would ever think to ask. A profound shift occurred within Aris. He was no longer just an archivist solving a cosmic puzzle. He was an investigator uncovering a conspiracy. The silence he had once found peaceful now felt menacing, claustrophobic. It was an artificial quiet, an enforced emptiness designed to hide a terrible sound. He was pushing against a wall built over 73 years, and for the first time, he felt the wall beginning to push back. The system wasn't just silent, it was hiding something. And the truth, he now knew, was buried deeper and was far more dangerous than he could ever have imagined. He wasn't just looking for an answer. He was hunting a secret someone was still willing to kill for. The wall pushed back. A week after his discovery of the Odyssey 7 probe, a message arrived from Sector Command. It was terse and cold, a string of official jargon that amounted to a simple command: stop. A formal directive to cease his unauthorized investigation into the corrupted Anomaly 73.K file and return to his assigned duties. An hour later, his access privileges to the deep archives were revoked. He was locked out. The system that had been his world was now a cage. But the directive had the opposite effect. It was a confirmation, as clear and bright as a supernova. It was proof that the secret was not a fossil from a forgotten past, but a living, breathing thing, still being fiercely protected. They weren't just asking him to stop looking at a dead case. They were ordering him to look away from a present danger. In that moment, Arias Thorne ceased to be an archivist. He became something else, the unwavering seeker. He held on to hope when no one else did. He moved his entire operation into the shadows of the station's network, creating a shielded, off-grid partition, a digital hideout where their eyes couldn't follow. He triple encrypted his files, bounced his searches through defunct satellites, and became a ghost in his own home. He knew the risks. He was violating a direct order, an act that would mean the end of his career. At this distance, with communications so easily lost, it could very well mean the end of his life. But the need for the truth had transcended professional curiosity. It had become a moral imperative. He felt a deep, almost paternal connection to the unknown source of the signal, a voice that had been silenced not once by the unimaginable gulf of space and time, but a second time by fear. It wasn't just a case of disappearance. This was removal. It was a voice someone had tried to erase, and Aris refused to let that stand. His guiding principle became a quiet vow, whispered into the sterile, recycled air of the station. He would uncover the stories they tried to bury. He would make sure this name, This voice does not stay forgotten. He carried himself not with vengeance, but with exhaustion, the kind that only comes from holding on too long, to hope too heavy to bear. He was one man, armed with little more than his own stubborn curiosity and a 73-year-old echo, standing against a conspiracy of silence that had held for generations. Justice, he knew, would not be a given. It would have to be carved from stone and sorrow.
Locked out of the main archives, cut off from any new information, Eris was left with the one thing they couldn't take from him: his complete, fully restored copy of the Anomaly 73.K data file. The signal was no longer just a clue. It was a sacred totem, the last surviving artifact of the lost narrative. He guarded it, studied it, and pored over its intricacies, convinced the key to the entire mystery was still hidden somewhere inside. He shifted his focus from the message to the medium. He began to analyze the signal's carrier wave, the faint, exotic energy signature upon which the mathematical lament had been broadcast. And he found something impossible. The wave had properties that defied the known laws of physics. It didn't degrade uniformly over distance, as all energy waves should. Instead, it seemed to shed layers like an onion, designed with almost surgical precision to arrive at its destination with only its core message intact. It was an arrow crafted to fly for eons and strike with a single sharp point. This changed everything. What he was hearing, he realized, wasn't the full message. It was the final, most desperate part of it, the only part meant to survive the journey. It was the last page of a book whose other chapters had turned to dust. Driven by a surge of adrenaline, he ran a simulation. He began to reverse engineer the waves, using quantum modeling to reconstruct the layers it had shed, attempting to hear what the signal might have sounded like at its source. For 3 days, the station's secondary processors ran at maximum capacity, their low hum a constant prayer in the silence. The result was terrifying. As the simulation restored the outer layers of the message, a new pattern emerged, one that had been hidden beneath the mathematical sorrow. It was a warning, a desperate, repeating plea broadcast in the universal language of pulsar mapping and hydrogen frequencies. And encoded within that warning, like a single word shouted in a storm, was a set of precise, repeating coordinates. His hands slick with sweat, Eris plotted the coordinates on a star chart. They did not point to a planet, a nebula, or a star. They pointed to a dead, empty patch of blackness within the Kepler-186 system, a place where absolutely nothing should be. It was a destination marked on no map, a location that, according to every survey ever conducted, did not exist. This wasn't just a signal from a distant star. It was a map to a hidden grave. And something was telling him to dig. The coordinates led him to nothing, a dead zone. But as Eris focused the station's gravimetric sensors on that patch of empty space, his screen lit up with impossible readings. He was looking at a gravitational anomaly, a place where the fabric of space-time was warped and twisted, suggesting an object of immense, planet-sized mass was present. But it was invisible, cloaked from every form of remote sensing known to man. It was a technological ghost, detectable only by the way it bent the space around it. He cross-referenced the location with the last known trajectory of the lost Odyssey 7 probe. A perfect match. The probe had been heading directly for this dead zone before it vanished without a trace. This was it. The source. The hidden lair. The structure, whatever it was, wasn't just quiet. It was actively hiding. It was a secret kept not just by men, but by physics itself. Eris felt a surge of rising dread, his heart pounding a frantic rhythm against the oppressive silence of the station. He was standing on the edge of a discovery that could rewrite everything. He made a decision. He bypassed every safety protocol, rerouting the station's primary power core to its most powerful communications array. He was going to reach out. He aimed the dish at the precise coordinates and sent a single, simple, active ping. A focused pulse of narrow-band radio waves, clean and sharp. It was the cosmic equivalent of knocking on a door that had been sealed for millennia. And then he waited. The silence that followed was different. It was deeper, more absolute than ever before. For one day, then two, then a week, there was nothing. No echo, no response, no sign that his message had ever been received. The emptiness that stared back at him was pristine, profound. He began to fear he had been wrong about everything, that he had chased a ghost to its final empty grave. He felt the crushing weight of his own solitude, a single man screaming into a void that refused to answer. He had reached the end of the trail, and there was nothing there. He slumped into his chair, the glow of his monitors reflecting a face etched with the exhaustion of a hope that was finally, irrevocably lost. The universe, it seemed, was finished with him. Just as Eris was about to transmit his final log, accepting defeat, the station's proximity alarms screamed to life. Red lights bathed the quiet command center in a frantic, pulsing glow. A signal was returning from the dead zone. It wasn't a reply in language. It was a reply in action. On his gravimetric sensor display, the anomaly flickered. For a fraction of a second, the cloaking field failed. The station's deep-range telescope, triggered by the sudden energy surge, automatically captured the image. Eris stared at the screen, his breath catching in his throat. What he saw would rewrite human history, and then be erased from it. It was a colossal structure, a lattice of impossible geometry that seemed to absorb the very light around it, blacker than the void of space. It was impossibly ancient, its surface pitted and scarred with the craters of micrometeoroid impacts accumulated over millions of years. It was no vessel, no station. It was a monument, or a tomb. But more chilling than the structure itself was what was latched onto its surface. The skeletal, ravaged remains of countless ships, none of them of human design. Twisted metal husks, crystalline hulls shattered like glass, organic-looking vessels, torn open like seed pods. They were clustered around the structure, like moths drawn to a flame that had utterly consumed them. A silent, floating graveyard that stretched for miles. Before the cloak could re-engage, in the last nanosecond of visibility, the station's energy sensors picked up a faint, rhythmic pulse from the structure's core. It was not a power source. It was not an engine. It was an emission consistent with only one thing: a containment field, a cage. The truth crashed down on Eris with the force of a physical blow, a devastating reveal that shattered every assumption he had made. The signal he had been chasing for months, the mathematical lament that had haunted his sleep. It wasn't a warning sent from the structure. It was a prison alarm, broadcast from within it. This wasn't a hidden lair. It was a prison. And the silence that had surrounded it for 73 years was not meant to keep people out. It was meant to keep something in. What they found in the ruins shocked even the most skeptical. This wasn't a mystery about who had sent a message. It was a mystery about who or what was the prisoner, and why its scream sounded like the death of a universe. A prison. The revelation reframed everything. The signal was not a cry for help. It was a desperate broadcast from a dying entity imprisoned within it. And the conspiracy, the 73 years of silence, it wasn't to hide the prison. It was to ensure the prisoner never, ever escape. With this new, terrifying understanding, Eris returned to Alara Vance's logs. There was one final layer of encryption, a biometric lock tied to Vance's long-dead vital signs. He bypassed it, and her last secret spilled onto his screen. It was an unsent report, a final confession addressed to a clandestine agency within the government he had never heard of, a group known only as the Silencers. Vance's team hadn't just heard the signal, they had fully decoded it. The entity, a non-corporeal consciousness from a dimension that had crumbled to dust, described itself as a thought predator, a being that didn't kill, but consumed. It fed on memory, on identity, on the very essence of what made a living thing itself. It had been captured and imprisoned eons ago by a race so ancient they left no other trace in the cosmos, a race that had sacrificed themselves to build the cage. The signal, the mathematical lament of a dying universe, was not a cry of sorrow for its own lost home. It was a weapon, a lure, a psychic siren song designed to broadcast existential despair across the galaxies. It drew in curious, empathetic species, and once they were close enough, it drove them mad with a sorrow that was not their own. In their final, grief-stricken moments, it used their ship's energy to weaken the containment field, one microscopic fracture at a time. The graveyard of ships surrounding the prison wasn't a warning, it was a buffet. Vance's team hadn't suffered from space sickness. They were the first human victims of its psychic attack. Her paranoia, her crew's nightmares, it was the predator tasting them through the bars of its cage. The betrayal was not by a person, but by the very nature of the universe Eris thought he knew. The most monstrous acts are committed not by mythical villains, but by forces hiding in plain sight. Vance's decision to bury the signal was not an act of scientific cowardice. It was an act of profound, terrifying responsibility. She wasn't covering up a crime. She was quarantining a plague. She was protecting humanity from a truth it was not ready for. That some mysteries are not meant to be solved, and some doors are meant to stay closed forever. She had stood on the precipice and chosen to save the world by robbing it of its greatest discovery. With Vance's final report open on his screen, the last pieces fell into place with sickening clarity. The Silencers were not some sinister cabal. They were a secret lineage of scientists and soldiers, A quiet order of guardians passing a terrible duty down through generations. They were the ones who had diverted the Odyssey 7 probe. They were the ones who had meticulously scrubbed the star charts. They weren't conspirators. They were the keepers of the quarantine, and Eris had just broken it. His ping, his knock on the door, had been interpreted by the prison's ancient automated systems as a potential threat, or worse, a rescue attempt. In response, the system had done the only thing it could. It had briefly lowered its cloak to display its history, its grim gallery of victims. It was a warning, a desperate attempt to show him the fate of all the other curious species who had made the same mistake. But his ping had done something else, something unintended, something catastrophic. He watched in horror as the energy readings from the prison's core began to change. His focused burst of radio waves, so insignificant to the colossal structure, had been just enough. A drop of rain on a dam already groaning under pressure. It had provided a tiny, focused burst of energy directly to the prisoner. The signal from the entity, the mathematical lament that had been his constant companion, was now growing stronger. Its modulation was shifting, twisting, adapting. It had felt his touch. It had learned from its brief interaction with him. The devastating reveal washed over him, a tide of ice. The entity was no longer just broadcasting sorrow. It was broadcasting hope, a false, tempting promise of answers to the universe's greatest questions, a siren song tailored not for empathy, but for curiosity, for ambition. It was offering the secrets of the cosmos, a cure for death, a map to the beginning of time. It was a lure perfectly crafted for a species like humanity. He had set out on a noble quest to give a voice to the forgotten, to make sure no name was lost to the silence. But in his righteous search for the truth, he had done the unthinkable. He had given a key to a monster. The silence hadn't been the prison. It had been the lock, and he had just picked it. He finally understood Vance's warning. Some doors are meant to stay closed, and he had just kicked one wide open. The entity was no longer just a signal. It was a voice, and it began to speak directly to Eris, not through sound waves, but through the station's systems, through the very fabric of his digital world. Visions flooded his mind. Images of dead galaxies, libraries of forgotten knowledge, the birth and death of stars playing out in the span of a heartbeat. The Predator had tasted his curiosity, and now it was feeding it. It offered him everything: the truth of creation, a mathematical solution to entropy, a glimpse of the face of God. It was a temptation of unimaginable power, a promise to end his aching loneliness and elevate him from a forgotten archivist to the most important human in history. In the face of that offer, Eris finally, truly understood how the other species had fallen. How could they not? He was faced with an impossible choice, a moral crossroad at the edge of the universe. He could expose the truth. He could broadcast everything he knew, the signal, the prison, the silencers, to a stunned and disbelieving Earth. It was a truth that would shatter every religion, every philosophy, every war and treaty and border humanity had ever conceived. But it might also rally them, unite them against a common cosmic threat. Knowledge, even terrible knowledge, could be a weapon. Or he could embrace the role he had stumbled into. He could take Ilara Vance's place on the wall. He could become the new solitary warden of the cage, dedicating the rest of his life to reinforcing the silence. He would have to protect humanity by burying its greatest discovery, by becoming the monster who hid the stars. He would have to trade his own identity for the sake of the species, becoming a ghost in a story no one would ever know was written. It was a choice between a truth that could destroy and a lie that might save. He stood in the quiet hum of his station, a single man holding the fate of his world in his hands, staring into the abyss. And the abyss, for the first time in 73 years, was staring back, offering him the universe in exchange for a key. What would you choose? Tell us in the comments. The truth that liberates, or the silence that protects. In the end, Eris Thorn made his choice. He sat at his console for one long, final night, the visions from the entity still echoing in his mind, and began to erase his own story. With the same meticulous skill he had once used to restore the ancient data, he now corrupted it, burying his discoveries under layers of false sensor readings and ghost code. He deleted his private logs, wiped his unauthorized network partitions, and severed every link that could lead someone else down the same path. He was pulling the thread back, mending the shroud. When he was done, only one task remained. He opened a secure channel to a hidden frequency, the one listed in Vance's unsent report for the silencers. He composed a single, coded message. It contained no name, no explanation, only the precise modulation of the entity's new siren song of hope, and a complex counter-frequency algorithm he had designed. He hit send. There was no confirmation, no reply, just a new, deeper silence. He was now part of the conspiracy, a guardian of the quiet. The story concludes not with justice served, but with a burden accepted. His home, Relay Station Epsilon, was no longer just a listening post. It was a watchtower on the edge of the abyss, and he was its lone sentinel. The silence he now keeps is heavier than before, filled with the profound weight of the truth he alone carries. The quiet is no longer empty. It is a shield. Some disappearances leave behind more than empty spaces. They leave questions that echo through generations, questions that become their own memorials. Eris Thorn had solved the 73.3-year-old mystery of Anomaly 73K, only to uncover a much older, more terrifying question. How long can one person's silence hold back the dark? The fight continues, not with ships and weapons, but with vigilance, with patience, and with the solemn, unspoken promise to never, ever answer the voice that whispers from the void. The truth is out there, but some truths are too dangerous to be found. And some names must remain forgotten, not because they are lost, but because they are locked away, for our own good. Thank you for watching Deep End Stories. Eris Thorn's choice leaves us with a haunting question. Can a lie told to protect be a greater good than a truth that could destroy?
Could his bravery in accepting this burden have unintended consequences we can't yet see? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe to Deep End Stories and hit the notification bell. We have many more stories of mysteries they tried to bury, and with your help, we'll make sure no name stays forgotten. Thank you.